Now let's take a look at the Council on Foreign Relations. This is kind of the premier globalist think tank, the globalist group that the public is actually allowed to hear about. But it wasn't always this way. They used to be very secretive back when not every politician had been bought. They kind of snuck around and didn't want to be found out because there was still strong nationalists, especially in the US here. Nationalism was important. And so these globalist groups like the Council on Foreign Relations hate nationalism, and they want to bring about a global government, a global one world order, a new world order. The Council on Foreign Relations is responsible mostly for the state of our media today, as well as many globalist agendas that are being pushed on us right now.
The year is 1917, and Representative Oscar Callaway enters a disturbing statement into the U.S. Congressional Record. The statement reveals why J.P. Morgan interests hired 12 high-ranking news managers. The 12 were asked to determine the most influential newspapers in America. They were to figure out how many news organizations it would take to control generally the policy of the daily press of the United States. The 12 found it was only necessary to purchase the control of 25 of the greatest papers. An agreement was reached. The policy of the papers was bought, and an editor was placed at each paper to ensure that all published information was in keeping with the new policy. Soon, that policy would be defined by a front group formed by J.P. Morgan and his colleagues. In fact, Morgan's personal attorney was founding president of the organization, the Council on Foreign Relations. Today, the CFR maintains that its goal is to increase America's understanding of the world. However, the actual objective of this highly exclusive club is revealed by the rare admissions of the insiders themselves. In the early 60s, a Georgetown University professor collects information for a book favorable to the network of powerful men who founded the CFR. For 2 years, Professor Carroll Quigley is allowed to examine the confidential papers and secret records of this network. Quigley reveals that these men aim to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. In short, they seek total and quiet control of the entire world. And the CFR is their most visible conduit for carrying out that agenda. CFR members include America's wealthiest tycoons, as well as the highly placed elite in government, academic institutions, tax-exempt foundations, and the establishment media. Ruling Class Journalists, written by Richard Harwood, describes the CFR membership as the ruling establishment in the United States. The Washington Post article boasted that news reporters who are CFR members do not merely analyze and interpret foreign policy for the United States, they help make it. Who are these policymakers? Many of their faces are familiar. NBC's Tom Brokaw, CBS's Dan Rather, ABC's Barbara Walters, Jim Lehrer of PBS, William F. Buckley of National Review, media mogul Rupert Murdoch, owner of the giant multifaceted News Corporation. These media heavyweights, and many others like them, are members of the CFR. Powerful corporations are also invited to become members. At the close of the 20th century, CFR influence presided over far-reaching consolidations of media control. In 1995, CFR members Michael Eisner of Disney and ABC's Thomas Murphy merged their media empires. Soon after the merger, the Disney-ABC empire becomes a CFR corporate member. In the year 2000, the world's largest internet service provider, America Online, joins forces with Time Warner, one of the world's largest news organizations. The CEOs favoring the move are CNN's Thomas Johnson and Time Warner's Gerald Levin. both CFR members. Once again, another media giant is created under the shadow of CFR influence. Today, an elite handful of individuals define the agendas that are supported by the empire of establishment news.
Welcome to another episode of Behind the Deep State, and today we have a special program for you. We're going to be talking about one of the key organizations in the constellation of organizations that make up the Deep State behind the Deep State. Actually, in our special report on the Deep State, one of our articles is about some of the kind of semi-secret organizations that really call the shots, and all these bureaucrats, all these people who run the intelligence agencies, they all kind of network through these organizations. And today we want to focus in particular on the Council on Foreign Relations. We know a lot about the CFR, as I'll call it for short. One of the key sources of information on the significance of the CFR to not just the deep state in the United States, but the international deep state, the real deep state pushing for this new world order. A lot of the evidence comes from a book by Georgetown University professor Carroll Quigley, who was actually a mentor to Bill Clinton, one of the few people that Bill Clinton thanked when he became president. He was very close to the deep state for many years, and in fact he said publicly that he agreed with their agenda. One of the things he did disagree with was the secrecy, but he was given an opportunity to examine their records for a period of several years. And in 1966, he actually spilled the beans, so to speak, in a book called Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time. Much of the book is rather boring, but it is an incredibly important book where he kind of outlines the goal of these people, a global neo-feudalist system with themselves in charge, and us, of course, as the serfs. And one of the things he says in this book, he says there does exist and has existed for a generation an international Anglophile network which operates to some extent in the way the radical right, which would be you, believes the Communists act. He said, in fact, this network, which we may identify as the Round Table groups, has no aversion to cooperating with the communists or any other groups, and frequently does so. Surprise, right? Here you thought the super capitalists were mortal enemies of the communists. And the lead Round Table group that he identifies in the United States is the Council on Foreign Relations. So we need to take a close look at this organization and see what it's all about, what the agenda is, what its members say, what its publications say, and we're going to do that. So to start with, we'll point out this group was created in 1921 after the League of Nations failed to get through the Senate. Basically, the globalists were furious that our Senate would not agree to surrender some of our sovereignty to this proto-global government. The group has less than 5,000 members at any given time. Of course, these are many of the most prominent people in American society, though, in business, in politics, in media, in banking, and so on. And to get a sense of just how influential this group is, let's listen briefly to Hillary Clinton while she was serving as Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Richard, and I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. I have been often to, the mothership in New York City. But it's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
So there you heard it, straight from the horse's mouth. No insult intended to horses, but she made very clear that she gets her orders from the Council on Foreign Relations. They tell her how she should think about the future. It's pretty amazing, right? But certainly that's only the Democrats, right, who hate America and want to, kill babies with abortions and want to surrender our sovereignty and open up the borders. Actually, no. Here's Darth Vader.
It's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations. As Pete mentioned, I've been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election back home in Wyoming.
Just kidding, it wasn't Darth Vader, right? That was Dick Cheney, the vice president under Republican President George W. Bush. So they're all part of the club, and then they laugh that they don't tell you about it on the campaign trail, right? I don't tell the folks back home in Wyoming when I'm running for re-election. And why would he, right? Why should the silly voters know that he's hobnobbing with people like Hillary Clinton behind the scenes to surrender our sovereignty? Just to give you a sample, again, they have almost 5,000 members at any given time, and fortunately, they have a website where you can find out all their members. But just to give you some sense, Roger Ailes of Fox News, Jimmy Carter, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Bill Clinton, Newt Gingrich, Mikhail Gorbachev, Henry Kissinger, members of the cabinet, right? Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. The cabinets are always dominated by CFR members until Trump came along. He's still got a few in there. CEOs, right? Some of the corporate members: Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, American Express, Citigroup, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank, Soros Fund Management, Bank of New York Mellon Corporation, Canadian Imperial Bank, Crédit Agricole, Rothschild North America, from the military-industrial complex, DynCorp, Booz Allen Hamilton, Raytheon, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, all the big oil companies, right? ExxonMobil, Shell, Chevron, BP, Hess, and the media, right? News Corporation, which owns Fox News and the Wall Street Journal, corporate member of the CFR. Also, National Geographic, Time Warner, which owns the Communist News, the Clinton, what do you call it? The CNN, right? HBO, The Economist, Bloomberg, right? All of these are members of the CFR, and you wonder why you get the same kind of garbage no matter what channel you flip to. It's because they're all members of the same deep state groups. We know a lot about their agenda, too, right? I mean, for one thing, by their fruits you shall know them, and we can kind of see the fruits, right? More war, more subversion, bigger government, more debt, less liberty, so we can see that. But we also have had whistleblowers. U.S. Admiral Chester Ward, he was a member of the CFR for more than 15 years, and then he defected and blew the whistle. He said a lot of stuff. He actually wrote a book, Kissinger on the Couch. I highly recommend you get a copy. He said the main purpose of the Council on Foreign Relations is promoting the disarmament of U.S. sovereignty and national independence. He said the goal is submergence of the United States into an all-powerful one-world government. This lust to surrender the sovereignty and independence of the United States is pervasive throughout most of the membership. Well, Admiral Chester Ward says that in the entire CFR lexicon, there is no term of revulsion carrying a meaning so deep as America First. The CFR has admitted all this itself. One of the key people involved in the CFR for decades, actually for generations, was David Rockefeller, the late David Rockefeller. And he confessed in his own book on page 405, his memoirs, he said that he's proud of being a conspirator with a secret cabal against the best interests of the United States, working to create a one-world economic and political order. I mean, this is what he says in his own book, right? It's not a theory, and it's not even a conspiracy if they're bragging about it in their books, right? I mean, they don't tell you about it in the fake media, but that's what they say. The CFR also has a little magazine. It's called Foreign Affairs. Admiral Chester Ward explained that if you want to know what the policy of the U.S. government is going to be years in advance, just read their magazine, Foreign Affairs, and they'll tell you, right? And what you see is remarkably, that becomes the policy of the United States government. But in 1974, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Richard Gardner wrote an article, and he wrote, quote, "In short, the house of world order will have to be built from the bottom up rather than from the top down. An end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, will accomplish much more than the old-fashioned frontal assault." So there you have it, right? These people are proud of the fact that they are eroding your national sovereignty. And think about what that means, right? If we lose our national sovereignty, we lose our Constitution, we lose our Declaration of Independence, we lose our right to govern ourselves, we lose our God-given rights that are protected by our Constitution, our right to speak freely, our right to worship God and to religious liberty, our right to petition the government for redress of grievances, our right to keep and bear arms, our right to a trial by jury. All of that is on the line with these globalists and their agenda. So we need to expose them, right? So you got to shine the light on these people, expose them, tell other people about them, and we need to oppose them. We need to oppose their agenda. We need to protect U.S. sovereignty. We need to protect our liberties and our Constitution. And we need to protect our independence from all these institutions that the CFR has helped to create, like the UN and the International Monetary Fund and all the rest of these globalist organizations that want to subvert our freedoms in our country. Being a member of the CFR should be the kiss of death in politics. It should be as politically toxic as saying that you're a Nazi or a communist or a racist, right? When someone is a member of the CFR, that should automatically disqualify them for consideration in the minds of voters for office, whether that be Congress or governor or state legislature or the presidency of the United States. It is unacceptable for these people to take our money, to put their hand on the Bible and swear an oath to the Constitution, and then turn around and stab us all in the back and work to subvert our Constitution and our liberty and our nation.
Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's not a cliche. It's a truism. The irony is that the powerful become the very pawns of the power they think they wield as it continues to consume them. It's a sickness that transforms a human being into an unfeeling monster. Woodrow Wilson encountered these sick, power-hungry people when he became their puppet president in 1913. He wrote in his book, The New Freedom, "Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacture are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it." He said there is a power somewhere. Sounds like the President of the United States in 1913 wasn't even sure of the source of the power that had him dangling on a string. That was Woodrow Wilson's reality 107 years ago, and it's every president's reality now. There is and has been for some time a resident power lurking in the shadows with a voracious hunger for power and a deep thirst for control. And isn't it interesting that rather than expose these powerful, life-consuming controllers, rather than speaking truth to power like they say they do, mainstream media hides these psychopaths, even mocks their existence, pushes their agenda, and exports their fear. They have the minds of their audience busy in a mental feedback loop that has taken advantage of the tribal instinct within the minds of every member of society. Philanthropic endeavors are exalted, and control-freak philanthropists are thrust into the limelight and presented as the saviors of the world. But propaganda is the shield behind which they hide. Propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels wrote, "The most brilliant propagandist technique will yield no success unless one fundamental principle is borne in mind constantly. It must confine itself to a few points and be repeated over and over."